Hello! Welcome back to the Tech Theater Skills series. My name is Chris Schlemp, and I've been an actor, director, projections designer, and teacher for over 20 years. I'm glad to be sharing some of my knowledge with you. This series is all about sound design and is intended for someone who is just beginning their voyage of discovery into the world of sound in the theater. The sound design series will be broken up into 7 parts, and this is episode 4, Copyright and Using Pre-Made Sounds, where we will be discussing the proper way to use music that has already been composed and or recorded by someone else. Time to get out a pen and notebook. Watching and listening are great ways to encounter a new topic, but you really make it your own by engaging with the material, writing down what you hear, and trying things out for yourself. The more you can connect your eyes, ears, hand, and brain, the more likely you are to learn. You all live in a world where an entire catalog of music is always at your fingertips, ready to be enjoyed and shared with whomever can hear your device. However, in the world of the theater, we can't just use music because we think it would be perfect for our show. We have to be sure we have permission to use the music. We have to be sure that we have secured the rights. A quick disclaimer before we proceed. I'm not an intellectual property lawyer, and this video can't give you legal advice. What we are trying to learn about is a set of guidelines for new sound designers to follow, but in any theater company, there should always be someone who is responsible for knowing the nature of the contracts that exist between the theater and the various music licensing agencies. Always consult with that person before proceeding to use any music. To guide us on our journey through copyright issues, let's take a return field trip to visit with Professor Craig Miller, the head of directing and assistant professor of acting and directing at the University of Idaho. He has been a sound designer himself for numerous productions and has a great deal of experience in this particular area.
So a couple of things that we want to talk about when we talk about the use of recorded or live music in theatrical production is who represents these people? Who represents the people who write the music and also perform the music? And there are 2 companies out there that most theater companies or theater producing organizations have ongoing agreements with. And that's the Broadcast Music Incorporation, and that's called BMI for short. And then we also have ASCAP, which is the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers. Now, I threw both of their websites up there because if you are a sound designer or you'd like to go out and see which artists, both songwriters and also performers, are represented by these 2 organizations, this is the place where you would go and find that information out. You would need to find out if the artist that you're working with or you have selected music from for to be included in your production needs to be represented by one of these 2 in order for this blanket agreement to be in effect. If you're working with an artist who does not have representation by one of these 2 organizations, you are responsible for reaching out to that artist individually and getting permissions and or paying a royalty to them for the use of their music in your production. Now, we want to start with what's called small rights. So like I said, most small theater companies have what's called a blanket agreement with BMI and ASCAP, right? And so the small rights are for what we consider non-dramatic uses, okay? So the use of recorded music for the purposes of lobby music, pre-show music, music planned to be played during intermission, or even incidental or transition music that's used to be, the sound connective tissue or the thematic connective musical tissue that is the transition between scenes. Those are all covered under the blanket agreements with BMI, okay? And the rights to use recorded music from artists represented by these organizations is referred to as small rights. And it has various limitations on usage. For one thing, you cannot use the entire song. You can only use a small clip of the song. An example, you're not permitted under small rights to distribute the music that you have selected for your production in any form. For instance, you can't burn a CD of your playlist. You can't publish your playlist on a website if you haven't, paid for that music. And you can't distribute it. not even to your cast members. You can't pass out CDs of the music that you've selected for the show. It can only be used on in the performance of the show in the theater where the blanket agreement and licenses are in effect. Now, you are permitted to convert music files into any format that allows you to upload the music to your sound equipment. So if you're using QLab and you need to, change an MP3 into a WAV file, you are more than welcome to do that, provided you have purchased that music from iTunes or some other online provider, or if you've burned it and uploaded it to your sound equipment. That's all within the legalities under small rights. The other kind of rights are called grand rights, and these are really for dramatic uses and performances. This usually means that an entire song is either going to be sung live on stage or played instrumentally on stage, or is going to be used in some way, shape, or form as a storytelling piece. And so what I want to get here is, as a general rule, a dramatic performance, which you would need grand rights for, usually involves using the work to tell a story or as part of a story or plot.
If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below, or if you happen to be in my class, add them in the chat. Let's see if we can figure out the answers together.
Now, licensing agreements with BMI and ASCAP, those small rights that we discussed already, they do not cover grand rights. Okay, and let's talk about a little bit more what grand rights are exactly. Okay, so a dramatic use or performance shall include, but not be limited to the following. 1, a performance of a dramatico-musical work in its entirety. So a recorded song from beginning to end without interruption cannot be done. A song cannot be sung as part of a theatrical performance in its entirety without applying for and receiving grand rights. Also, the performance of one or more compositions from a dramatico-musical work accompanied by dialogue, pantomime, dance, stage action, or visual representation of the work from which the music is taken. Also, a performance of one or more musical compositions as part of a story or plot, whether accompanied or unaccompanied by dialogue, pantomime, dance, stage action, or visual representation. And or as a performance of a concert version of a dramatico-musical work. And just so we understand what we're talking about, when we say dramatico-musical work, the term includes, but cannot be limited to, a musical comedy, opera, a play with music, or a musical review or ballet that are specifically written as those kinds of pieces. Now, depending on how a director wishes to use music in a production, it may mean that your organization that you're working for, they need to cross over into grand rights from small rights, in which case you have to obtain permission from the rights holder, and you're probably likely going to have to pay some sort of negotiated royalty for the use of those kinds of music pieces that you're going to use in their entirety. Okay, there are some best practices when we think of using sound for theatrical production, whether we're going to be singing it or playing it live or using a digital recording of it. And the first one is that directors and designers, engineers, and even the producing organization, you've got to be aware of the rules. You need to understand and be informed on how policy for this music applies to the use of it for your productions. You also want to make sure that the artist or the title is represented by BMI or ASCAP. So once the music has been selected by the creative team, you can confirm whether the musical artist or title is represented by BMI by using their respective repertoire search engines on their websites. If the artist and or title is in their catalog, then you don't need any further representation or coverage. However, if the artist or title, like I said before, is not covered by either BMI or ASCAP, your creative team has a couple of choices. They can either select a different artist, or they can begin the process of acquiring those specific rights from the artist who is not being represented. And typically the theater company that you're working for has someone on staff who can help in that process. Number three, make sure the artist is going to be compensated, right? This is kind of a moral imperative. We should always make an attempt, whenever possible, to compensate all musical artists for the usage of their work in the manner and in which we acquire the source for the music. For example, right? If I'm purchasing a song off of iTunes and I'm downloading it for the use in my show, the artist is receiving compensation because I made that purchase on iTunes. If I purchase a CD, right, which doesn't happen a whole lot anymore, or some other digital recording, and upload one of the tracks from that CD into the sound equipment, the artist has received compensation through the purchase of that CD. We do, however, want to discourage directors and designers from downloading music from online sources that are quote unquote free or questionable. All right. And the last one is determine early in the process if grand rights were going to be necessary, because permissions must be granted and possibly royalties must be paid. This takes time, folks. And so directors and sound designers should determine early if grand rights are needed. For example, if you're going to produce a play in the public domain, something that was written by Shakespeare or something that was written by Moliere, you may wish to insert a song sung by one of the cast members into one of the scenes in the aid of telling that story. Well, this would constitute grand rights, in which case you would need to secure permission to use that song. Additionally, if the director or the designer wishes to modify the lyrics of a song, or they would also need to have written permission from the rights holder to do so, in the same way that you cannot change any of the text of a play script without the author or the playwright's permission. As another example, we would also have to obtain written permission from the copyright holder of the play itself if we wish to insert a song or a piece of music into an existing play that's going to be part of the storytelling or exist in a dramatic way. So there are plays that are out there that are they're in the public domain, which means that they're not covered by copyright law. That would be Shakespeare, pretty much anything that came along prior to 1915, okay? But anything that is covered by copyright law in the world of the play itself, if the play is being represented and you have to pay a royalty to do the play, and you want to add music, an entire song to be sung or an entire song to be played within that play, you not only have to get permission for the grand rights to use that song, but you also have to reach out to the copyright holder of the play. It's usually either the playwright's representation or the playwright themselves, and they must grant permission for you to use that in the performance of the play. The last thing that we want to remember is that copyright infringement or copyright violation is not only immoral, because you're literally taking money out of an artist's pocket when you use music that you don't have the right to use or haven't gotten permission to use. You're actually taking the livelihood away from a fellow artist. It's also unethical because there's no integrity in the decision to use someone's art for the benefit or furthering your own art. We need to be ethical about those things. And copyright infringement and violation is illegal, which means that if you get caught doing it, not only can you be fined, but if there's a long track record of it happening, you can be blacklisted by theater companies. You can be blacklisted by BMI or ASCAP, which means they wouldn't let you use their music or artists anymore. But you could also be prosecuted and possibly serve time for large copyright infringements.
Okay, time for you to try it out. Imagine you are a sound designer for a small theater company working on the playlist for the intermission music that will play in between acts during a play. Your director wants you to select 4 songs for intermission that match the mood of the play. Do you remember what this type of rights is called? Do you remember how you go about finding out whether it is okay for you to use the songs you have picked? You learned a lot today. You took another field trip to the University of Idaho. You learned about small rights and grand rights. And you learned about some best practices in terms of determining whether or not it is moral, ethical, and legal to use pre-made music for your production. I really want to thank Professor Miller for volunteering his time and expertise again to help us understand this complicated topic a little better. And I want to thank you for stopping by today to learn some more about sound design. If you enjoyed learning, please feel free to like and subscribe. In the next episode, we will examine ways to record and edit sounds of your very own. I look forward to continuing this journey with you next time.